All right, so welcome to another episode of Hanging in the Basement. And this time I have a very special guest to my heart and probably to many listeners' hearts, I imagine. And if you don't know this guy yet, you'll know him soon. His name is Sid Garza-Hillman. Welcome to the show, Sid.
Thanks. Great to be here. Yeah.
And
All caps in base. That's all I'm talking about.
so, yeah, like what the heck is that? That has a story, by the way.
I I thought it'd be spelled BASS.
Mm,
Right,
okay.
yeah, right. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I know what you're
Yeah.
saying. And I do play bass. I
I
do like.
figured that's why I had to look at it twice. I was like, that should be BASS, I think. Anyways, I'm totally kidding. Anyway, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. And so I'll just brief introduction. I've been listening to Sid Garza-Hillman's podcasts and his messages and his encouragement. So I would say since 2016, but it could be 2015. I don't know when you started your first podcast.
Probably around then, approaching the natural, yeah.
Yeah, so
Boy,
maybe
boy, oh boy.
I didn't catch you at the very beginning of it, but I was listening to the Approaching the Natural podcast. And so I met someone at a running group I was in, and we were telling about each other about podcasts we like, and she mentioned Approaching the Natural. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like the type of thing I'm looking for, and I thought it was this big thing, and and then I kind of gathered it was this one guy who had this vision, and which is it's a big thing in that respect. The message is very big and powerful. But
Thanks.
then I got to know you,
Right.
through that.
Yeah. We've been in
Uh,
contact for years now. It's
yeah, I would email you, and you actually would respond, which is cool. And and I loved your messages because they were really they were natural. Like you're a guy trying to make it in the world in your way, and you have a message, and you're artistic and you're creative. How are you going to do it? And you're like, I'm just going to do it, and people like it, they don't like it. That's too much for me to take that. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of the kind of what I was getting, and that was inspiring to me because I wanted to do a very similar thing. I was on a similar path. So seeing someone who was, so many steps ahead doing that type of thing, I'm like, wow, I could learn from this guy. And
cool.
so thank you for being you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, it's always a struggle, but I mean, that's kind of how it's been. Like if you once you can, it's very liberating to let go of worrying about what the response is going to be, because then you actually get into your headspace of how you want to actually create and what you want to put out in the world truly. And sometimes that means you have to shut yourself off from the world a bit, just so you're not
Mhm.
kind of looking over your shoulder and what do they think. And I've taken some real in the world steps around that, putting social media, for instance, turning off comments on my YouTube videos for the last few years. I just turn them off. I'm not like I get a ton of views, but I just shut them off. And so it's like, watch it, don't watch it. It's up to you. Good. Hope you like it.
Yeah.
But if you don't, totally okay for you. So yeah.
Yeah. My wife is also a YouTuber and kind of new to the scene. But she remembers that story when you turned off your YouTube comments some years ago. That affected me, and I told her, and she remembers that. And I had a memory of why that's useful because today I'm working on my autobiography, and I went
Oh,
into
nice.
a year when my first book came out, my single string book, and just 2014. And I don't really go and look at that often because I don't have a lot of reviews. And anyway, on that one, I got a new one-star review. Like I didn't want to read this, but I had to check it because of my book purposes, my
Uh-huh.
story.
Yeah, got it.
And I'm like,
I know. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah. And it's this kind of thing about we live in comment culture now, and it's like everybody has a voice, or everybody always had a voice. But in the social media sphere, in that kind of, I feel like they get a louder say than they would have if they were just a kind of a nut sitting on a corner, with a pamphlet. You know what I mean? And so they kind of like
mhm.
they can get into you, and it's sort of an all access pass for people, and it is a struggle. But yes, some shutting off was the name of the game for me, just as an artist and just as a person trying to write books and things that I've done, just to kind of shut that down because it tends to get in the way of how you want to express yourself, and if you want to leave them open, fine, but you got to really take an effort not to look at them. Like I mean, people review my books on Amazon. I can't shut those off.
Right.
Um, and it's weird because the publisher of especially my last book, like, they always want you to have more comments. They want you to have reviews. They're like, please ask your people to review. I don't like asking people to review. Like I don't like just like if you
I
review or
get
don't
it.
review. I don't like asking, please review. It's like it just I don't, and I too totally to my detriment, by the way. It's not like this, this doesn't help my career, but it's
Right.
just kind of nice to just be like, I'm putting the book out. People review. I got 1 stars. Um, 1 stars don't even leave a comment. They're just like
Right.
1 star, boom, and no, they don't even like take the time to write. So it's like I don't even know what like beef they have with a book. They're just like 1 star. It's easy. I don't have to push the button multiple times, or whatever. So it's just funny.
Yeah, man. Ugh, it's icky.
Yeah.
And I'm reading a book about F. Scott Fitzgerald right now and a biography. But partly because I'm writing my autobiography, I'm like really deep diving in a lot of biographies and autobiographies. And he's not my favorite author, but there's something about if you learn about him, I feel, then you're going to learn about the 1920s and the 10s and
Yeah.
kind of that period that it's hard to get a really deep look, beneath the surface of what a person's life was like
Mhm.
from my perspective. So you got to go to those people who there is a lot to learn about. And anyway, he was really very sensitive about his writing, apparently, and kept the detailed notes about all the money he earned per published work, and
Wow.
it was like a failure and what he could possibly, extract some paragraphs from for a later work, but it's been rejected several times. And when he went to London, like This Side of Paradise, his first novel was bad reviews, and he really started to like dislike English people, like he took
Right.
it real personal, you
Wow.
know.
Yeah.
You can imagine before social media how like like there it is, it's in print,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's the thing where and everyone's going to see it really because there
Yeah.
wasn't that many places to get information back then, and
Yeah.
yeah, it
That's an
must have hurt.
article. Yeah, that's an article and that can just, that there is there's sort of good and bad for both those eras, but with this, with nowadays, with so many people commenting, I think there's probably little less value per comment, just in terms of
Right,
they
sure.
flooded the market. But back then, if you had a scathing review in the newspaper, that could tank your book because there's
Yeah.
nothing else out there. That's like the one thing, and you just hope to God not a lot of people are reading that, because it's just that can take you down. Nowadays, it's thousands of people potentially, and comment culture is a fascinating thing. I've been thinking about it a lot over the last few years. Just people take the time to write the weirdest stuff, and it's just they just have this weird psychological need to be heard. And I sort of go, why don't you go create something? Because that's like a way healthier way to like be heard. Like have the courage to put your ass out there. Leaving a comment on a video or a Facebook, it takes nothing. It doesn't cost anything. Literally, it doesn't cost anything, but also
Mhm.
just psychically, it doesn't cost anything. And you're just leaving it out there. And it just hasn't been good for us as a species. I mean, I think we can sort of agree, especially with kids. Like when you're looking at kids and how they are affected by, people not liking their photos and people not, follow, it's just this
Mhm.
whole thing. I mean, my God, get outside and play, because it's just not, it hasn't been a good thing for us. If it were like really good for the species and I didn't like it, I'd be like, okay, well, it's working, but it's not. It's clearly not working. And,
No,
and I have this naive, there's people like Cal Newport, wrote a book called, Deep Work, and it's about, social media and all this kind of stuff. I read it when I was working on my second book, so I couldn't focus. I lost focus. My first book came out. I kind of poured through that. Second book comes out. I start to write it, and I'm like distracted. First book I was on social media. Second book I was, and I'd write for 5 minutes, go on Facebook. Write for 5 minutes, go on Twitter. And it was like, and then one time I was on YouTube distracting myself, and I saw a TED talk by this guy Cal Newport saying, quit social media or why I have no social media, and I was like, wait, what? So to distract myself from my book, I watched this 13-minute TED talk, and it was all about that. And but and he made some really incredible points. But one of the things that was interesting to me is he's got a best-selling book and he has no social media. So I
yeah,
know
I
that's not. I know
think
that's
I've
not.
seen that talk. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's not typical, but it's possible. Hasn't happened to me, but it did give me enough of like, oh, that you can do this,
Hmm.
and then really when you look into like social media, so many people's hundreds of thousands of followers are not real. let's face it. They're
Yeah.
purchased and and like some of these publishing companies and even music, record companies, how many followers do you have? It's like, oh, please don't be lazy. Do your job. Because that's not real anyways. You can buy followers, and it's like a totally artificial, you know.
Yeah, so I definitely want to, I've listened to a lot of many of your podcasts and several of interviews that you've done over the years or co-podcasts, when you've been a guest on the show.
Yeah.
But I never got too much from my experience of like the history of Sid. I mean, I got, a little bit back in LA, but I'm kind of curious to really dive into if whatever you want to share of who you were when you grew up as a kid and
Yeah.
how music played an important role in your life and how it's still, it's still there. You can't get rid of it. You got the bug,
Yeah.
right?
I got the bug. Yeah, I played music from, I mean, age 7. I was 6 or 7 when my parents introduced me and my sister, who was a couple of years older, to piano. And I was taking lessons, and then she didn't like it, so she didn't continue, and I did, and so I did. And learning piano like you do, classical music or whatever. I could play, Moonlight Sonata, kind of stuff, and really liked it though. Didn't practice as much as I should have, like a kid does, but I really, really liked it. I also played sports, so I was kind of fairly typical in that sense. But I really liked piano, and I took to it. And I took piano lessons for a good 7, 8 years, and then I moved to Texas, and I didn't continue there, but I continued playing. So I had a band in high school, and at that point, I had still played keyboards, but started to teach myself guitar, electric, and it was just a cover band. We'd play at parties and stuff called The Void. Is that the most 1980s band name? I don't think you can ever. Anyways, and so we were like covering like Talking Heads, like U2, the Cure. Like it was, we played new. Here I am like a kid. I moved from San Diego. That's where I was taking the piano. San Diego to Texas. So talk about a shock. So here I am, this like new wave kid showing up in Texas for high school, and I'm like, "Hey, Elvis Costello," and they're like, "Hank Williams Jr." I was like, "Elvis Costello," and so,
Wow.
but I stuck with it. Really liked it, and it started writing songs in high school. They were not very good, but they were just, I had that urge of like, oh, I want to create. I came from a musical family. My dad played a little bit ukulele, but my uncle is semi-famous. He was the bass player in the Byrds, which was, in the 1960s. He's Chris
Oh,
Hillman, so
wow.
he was the bass player in the Byrds, and so then he started Flying Burrito Brothers with Graham Parsons. Like he's, in that he's not as big as anybody else that most people haven't heard of
He's a
him.
real musician in that world, right? Yeah.
Made his whole. He's been a career musician for many years. Had a band called Desert Rose Band Country. They had top 10 hits. He's had that level. Most people probably haven't heard of him, ironically, but he's had made a good career out of it. So I mean, obviously it started with the Byrds, but then Flying Burrito Brothers, seminal bands, Manassas, all sorts of. Anyways, so I was sort of around that world, also going to his shows and staying with him when I was a kid a few times, and like seeing his studio, and it was always just like, oh my God, pretty cool. So that was definitely an influence on me for sure. Now I went to college and I studied philosophy, but all through college was playing, writing. And then I think I graduated from UCLA, or I was still a student. I can't remember. I think I'd graduated. No, I had a band in college and stuff, and we never went anywhere. But then I started doing solo stuff, kind of folky in the beginning, just acoustic guitar and me, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I started gigging around Los Angeles pretty regularly, like a lot, a few times a month, and even more. And really liked it. And then I graduated from UCLA, and I took a job working in the audiovisual department at UCLA. And it was the best job ever because it was all artists and musicians and actors and writers and these like it was a public dime, easy to make money, not a lot of
Wow.
money, but like super easy. I was tutoring part time, driving a motorcycle, and playing gigs. And really, that was my goal after getting a bachelor's degree, was becoming a full time musician. Never happened, but that was my full focus, was like work whatever job and play gigs. Period.
And
And
you were living in LA because you went
yeah,
to UCLA?
yeah, I
Okay.
stayed in LA.
That's
I just stayed.
perfect
I just
place
kind of
for
was
it.
like, okay, I guess I've lived in a little studio apartment. I get on my motorcycle and drive to UCLA in the morning at 7 a.m. and set up slide projectors. Not kidding. I can still thread a 16 millimeter film projector. I guarantee you, because I just did it 1,000 times. But it was really easy, an easy job, health insurance, just kind of like full. There was some cool, like there was a band, years ago, they actually shared studio space with me called Stanford Prison Experiment, which was like an alternative rock band, and they got signed to Island, and they opened for Rage Against the Machine, and I got to it was a big bat stage for that. Like it was kind of the scene. I was
Uh,
more indie rock by that time, a little bit of Western style, kind of a alt country ish.
hmm
By that time, I'd started my band called the Sid Hillman Quartet, and we were active. We toured. We did. It's like I couldn't make a living on it because it's so expensive to have a band, and unless you're really killing it. But I made enough to break even. Like we went on tour and I was able to cover that. Like we sold merch and we put out, a couple indie labels put out our records, so they were nationally distributed. And I toured, opening for a band called Mojave 3 out of UK, and they were pretty big. They came from a band called Slow Dive, which was like an emo shoegazing kind of band that got pretty good heat. And then they broke off, and a few of them created Mojave 3. And they had a good following. We were playing sold out shows, six, 700 people a night. This
nice.
little indie
Wow.
band. Yeah, it started because my guitar player at the time, they were coming into town. Mojave 3 was. And they were playing at a venue called the Troubadour, very famous venue.
Sure. Yeah.
And the night before they were playing at Slim's in San Francisco. And so my guitar player, just on a lark, somehow got in touch with their manager, and they're like, "Hey, can we open for you?" And they didn't have an opening band, just by full chance. And so we got them an album. They liked it. Our first album, which was not released on a label. This was independently released on vinyl and CD. And they said, yeah, yeah, you can open for us and in LA. And we said, sure. And then like a week before, they were like, actually, can you open for us in San Francisco? And we were like, okay. So we drove up to San Francisco. My bass player had to be at work the next morning at 7. So we played the gig in San Francisco, got in the van, and drove back home starting at midnight from San Francisco back down to LA. Anyways,
Well, no
and
traffic, at least, right?
yeah, no, exactly. But just Red Bull,
It's awful.
Anyways,
It's awful.
yeah. So that was San Francisco, by far the biggest gig I'd ever played by that. I mean, we played maybe to 100 people at that point. This was 650, 700 people, and I was scared to
Wow.
death. But it was a really good show, and they really liked us. So then we come back to next day to LA, Troubadour, kill it again. We have a really good set, good response from the crowd. And at that point after the show, they were like, "Hey, would you be willing to come back and we're coming back in the winter. Would you want to open for us on tour?" And we said, "Yeah." So yeah. So we drove to Atlanta, Georgia, in a van, my band, and drove across the country. Met them in Atlanta, Georgia, in a tour bus. Dropped off our rental van, got in a tour bus, a full-on tour bus with bunk beds, 2 lounges, the whole thing, and played our first show in Athens, Georgia, and then back to Atlanta. And then we just went up the East Coast, crossed into Canada, came back down. We had 19 shows in 21 days. It was insane. It was like, here we are, this like indie band. And we had gotten a little bit of attention in LA. Like we were on a popular radio station, like live. And so it was starting to move for us a little bit, which is cool. But that was next level. And we played. And I remember it was like the first show in Athens, Georgia, at this really famous venue called the 40 Watt. And one of my favorite singer-songwriters is this guy named Vic Chesnutt. Have you heard of Vic Chesnutt? You
No.
gotta check out. He's one of my favorite. He died, but he's one of my favorite singers of all time. And he's an Athens, Georgia guy. So is Michael Stipe, and Michael Stipe from REM
Yeah.
discovered Vic Chesnutt.
Okay. I'll
Anyway,
take
so that's
note of
how.
his name. Yeah.
Yeah,
Vic.
Vic, and then Chesnutt. It's not like the nut. It's actually Chesnutt.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just incredible. Anyways, and so he mentions the 40 watt in one of his songs. So here I'm like playing at the 40 watt. I mean, my God, I still have a photo like on the marquee of the band named Sid Hillman Quartet. I was like, oh my God. Anyways, so we play that game. We play that gig. I think I'm like 34 at this point. It's probably about right because it's been a while now. And we do the show. We get in the van. We get in the tour bus, and we were partying. And we're it's like 3 in the morning. We're just going to sleep now. And I realized I had left like all my stuff in the bus like storage, including my sleeping bag. So I climb in my bunk, and I'm like covered in this parka that I have because it's winter. I mean, we're literally like in East Coast of winter. And I'm like laying there, and I'm going, man, if this had happened 10 years before. Like I was 34. I was married. I was missing my wife a lot. And I was like, this is what is the dream. And yet I'm sort of like, 34 was just like on the edge of like this would be so
Yeah.
much more fun if I was 24,
Sure.
and so I'm like shivering in a bunk bed. I'm like, what is happening here? Anyway, you get in the flow of stuff, you show up, you sound check, and you so on and so forth. And so that was the beginning of being really a full-time musician for years. I mean, up until I moved up here where I live now in the Northern California coast. But that was I was full-time musician. How I made my living changed. I went from audiovisual department to becoming a full-time actor by just chance. Some guy who he became a friend, liked my music, he was coming to my shows. He introduced me to his agent. They signed me, and there I started auditioning and working all the time. So I quit my full-time job. I was working enough as an actor, and that allowed me the freedom to do things like tour, which I did multiple times because I didn't have a job. So I'd be like, I'd tell my agent, I'm like, gone for 3 weeks, and just like leave. So
Wow.
that was I don't talk about that stuff a lot, like at all, ever, I don't think. But those are the days of, music as my identity. Just that's what I was. Everybody knew me. I was as that, and period, and full time for years, and just sort of audition, get a commercial here, commercial there, make a good amount of money, and play gigs twice a week, rehearsal 2 or 3 times a week rehearsals, and regular gigs, and just churning it out, day after
Wow.
day.
So if you weren't trained as an actor and you just someone kind of gave you a shot and it worked, how did you do about memorizing lines and stuff like that? Was it because you were a singer, you knew how to memorize words or something? Or
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of performance aspect, having come from a
yeah,
music background,
yeah.
having played gigs forever, like getting in front. I mean, it wasn't theater, it was, commercials and TVs and movies, but you're still having to, hit your mark. You're still having to perform in front of
Mhm.
thing under pressure. I was really good at that. I'm not, I was a bit player. I wasn't you're not going to see me starring in a movie. I was the waiter in a, in a, in a restaurant, what kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I was, but I was solid there. And it was interesting because I remember my agent, I started working like almost immediately and I started working regularly. And I would see guys 10 years just audition after nothing, like just nothing. Here I was a month in, booking a Twix commercial, like just with no business, like I didn't take acting class, like but I had the ability, I could just do it. And I remember to do the Twix commercial, which is I still am in the Screen Actors Guild since 1995. Um, you couldn't, I wasn't in the guild yet. I was eligible, but I wasn't a member of the guild. So I booked this Twix commercial, and I can't do it until I formally join the Screen Actors Guild. That's the rules.
Okay.
So I show up to the Screen Actors Guild office on Wilshire Boulevard in LA, and with cash. They won't take a check or a credit card. You have to pay with cash because they don't want you writing a fake check and doing a gig. Like I don't even know whatever. But so I show up with 487.50. I always remember the 50 cents because I literally had 2 quarters. I was like, really? You could round up and I probably wouldn't sweat it too much, but whatever. So 487.50. And that's about what I made from the day of on the Twix. So you get your pay of the day, and then in theory, if it runs on TV, then you get residuals. But there's a lot of commercials that never run. So here I do this commercial. I paid about this almost exactly the same amount to join. And I'm like, this could be the worst investment ever. Like I could literally make the money from the day that went out to pay, and if this doesn't air and I never work again, it's a zero. I've made $0 as an actor, but
Mm.
but it ran. And then I got another one and it ran. Then I got another one and it ran. And then it was like a TV show and that ran, so it just sort of built. And it was a good living, but it wasn't a great living, but it was good. I was making more than I was making at UCLA. I was making more than my wife was making. She's a full-time graphic designer. And we would joke around because she'd be working her ass off in the home studio. Or actually at this point she had a studio in Santa Monica. And I'd go bowling on a Tuesday. And she'd go, God damn. And I go, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, the residual checks are coming in. I'm not lazy. Like I'm making it, like I was making more money. Like I was making a good amount and we'd go bowling at like 11 a.m. Just because I had a gig that night or whatever and no auditions. And so I had days off. It was such a weird time for
Wow.
like 10 years. It went like that. 10
Oh
years of
my
just
gosh.
that life. Anyways, yeah. So it's funny time.
Oh man. What a cool story. Yeah, I knew there was some good stories in there. So I definitely want to hear about which music you like. There's a lot of questions I have, but anyway, one thing I want to mention was uh again with the biographies I'm reading. I read Boris Karloff's biography not too long ago, and he was one of the. I learned that he was one of the key players in getting SAG, Screen Actors Guild, off the ground.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and he really spoke. uh, on behalf of it, and like they held some of those meetings at his house and stuff like that
Wow.
in the very beginning. So
Cool.
we're talking like 19th, I think it was the 30s. Am I wrong? Yeah, somewhere
I
around
mean,
there.
I don't know the history, unfortunately. I probably should, but that's interesting. And it was a game changer for, it is a weird, it's a weird business, obviously. That's a stupid thing to say, but it is. But if you're making a living in it, I mean, if you want to talk about identity change, I was raised, my dad was military. He was with Continental Airlines as a pilot. He was a fighter pilot in the Air Force, and then he, became a commercial pilot. And he was with Continental Airlines. It doesn't exist anymore, but he became United. But he was with Continental for 27 years. I mean, this was you get a job and you stay in the thing. And I was, already had broken out because I wanted to play music, but I also had this like working at UCLA. It was very predictable and it was very like safe, and here I am quitting my job. It was super out of my wheelhouse. Like the comfort zone was very weird. And I remember talking to my wife, and she owns her own graphic design firm. So clearly, like she's not also in a safe thing.
Right.
And by that time, I was making enough of a living acting. So I went on a trail run and just biffed it. So that's what you're looking at here. Um, I so I'm talking to her, and and at this point, I've made enough money to survive maybe a few months without a job. And at this point, audiovisual, I had been promoted. I was supervising. It was starting to stress me out, and I just didn't like it anymore. And I was just kind of like, it just was burning me out. And I said to her, I think I want to quit. And this is when I already knew, but this is when I knew I'd married the right woman who I've now been married to for 30 years. Because here she is. I'm an actor, the least safe job, period. Um, Maybe indie rock music is less safe for that, but pretty close. And she's a graphic designer on her own. And she said, "Okay, we'll figure it out." That's what she said. And I remember that conversation. I remember sitting in the front of on the porch in our little house in LA. We had 1,000 square foot little house.
Nice.
And I remember sitting there. She goes, "We'll figure it out." And I put in my notice at UCLA. It's a couple months. It was by that time I'd been there a long time. I'll be cool. I'll be cool. But anyway, so a couple months. Anyways, and there I remember that last day. I went to UCLA. I had my final day at work. 5 years there. And we got in a car. She picked me up. We were going to visit her brother up in Davis, and we got in the car and we got on on Highway 5 on the 5 freeway. And I was like, "Oh my God, what did I do?" And there's been a few times in
Like
my
they
life
must
where I'm
feel like
like,
you're about to throw up or something, right?
it was very much of like, but and when you have it, and this is why I'm so like fierce about stress management in my coaching. Long before I discuss anything about food or anything, it's all about stress because when you can be in a sort of managed stress space, you can have a little perspective. So it's like it was shocking to me. There's no doubt about it. Completely out of my wheelhouse, not comfortable, like, whoa. But at the same time, I was like, well, worst case is I could get another job. It wasn't like UCLA was like, I mean, it was $13 an hour. This wasn't like a thing, you know what I mean? So it wasn't, so I was able to have enough. It was weird, but it was enough of perspective to say, worst case. Now,
Mhm.
here's what's funny. I probably shouldn't talk about this because it's so ridiculous. My wife still makes fun of me to this day. But I was so used to a schedule. I'd always worked, I worked jobs. I worked all through high school, worked all through college. So here I am, no schedule. And I'm trying to eke out a music career. So I made myself a schedule. Wake up at 8:30, call, submit demos to record labels from da 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 da. But I put coffee on the schedule, like at like 8:45, coffee. And she goes, "Really? You had to write yourself in a coffee." She totally makes fun of me. She goes, "You had to write yourself in a coffee break." You know,
Like you,
I
like you might forget the coffee break.
yeah, yeah. And because it has to be scheduled. I mean, I'm at home. I can make a coffee like literally whenever I want. And it was so funny. She'd make fun of me because I was so much in the like, oh my God, I really got to lock in here. I really have to be
I see.
focused. Yeah.
You're a little
And
like ungrounded. You want to make sure, like,
correct. I
yeah,
didn't want to just sit on the couch and watch TV and lose this time that I didn't know how long it was going to last. I never knew for 10 years when my next job was going to come. That was a mental training like no other in my entire life to this day. I did not know I would work a gig. I'd get a job doing an American Express commercial and think that could be my last job ever. I mean, anytime. And not only that, your health insurance for my family, including my daughter at the time, was tied to my income. So if you don't make a certain amount, you make under that amount, you lose your health insurance. So it's like you're in under this pressure
Mm,
that is, and you have to sort of balance that with the other stuff that I was pursuing, i.e., music, and spending my own money recording albums and EP. The quartet did 5 albums and 2 EPs. I'd already
yeah,
done 2 solo records before that and an EP. It cost money. So I wasn't socking a bunch of money away. I was spending it on music and things that we were doing. Not all of it. I wasn't like throwing our savings, but I mean, it was enough. Like we didn't have a lot of savings.
sure.
And so it was like very uncomfortable. And if you've listened to me for a lot, discomfort is a major theme in the work that I do now.
Yeah,
And people don't know. My clients don't have any idea why that is such as it is, and it's because of what we're talking about here, which I've never talked about on a podcast before, which is floating around like that is a very odd feeling when you are safety, 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 and then you're just and it can all fall gone, just at a moment's notice,
yeah.
So it was
And what's interesting about that situation that you found yourself in, you allowed yourself to be in, right? Is that you didn't have to. You could have got like some sort of safe job, but you felt that if you had the freedom to work on the music by doing something like acting, then you could kind of have your cake and eat it. You could have the best of both worlds in a way, I guess, right? But then
yeah.
the danger element was just this. You got to kind of be walking on the air a little bit because every step is kind of faith based step,
Yeah. It's
right?
it's 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 very hard to get used to. I mean, I had friends who were actors who'd be like, I know that I'll always get more work. And I was like, I never felt it, not one time. Not one time did I ever feel that. I never thought, I'll get work. I'll just get work. I know I'll get work. I never felt confident, not one time. And it's just a weird, it was such an abrupt change for me. And I really remember feeling two things simultaneously. One, I did not want to waste the opportunity that I had. So I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure that I was investing not money, but me into music. I was in my brain a singer-songwriter. We never hit the big time, but I kind of take the piss out of the whole statement, fake it till you make it. Because in LA, that means I just dress like a rock star. But to me, we were behaving as a very successful band. We recorded in really good studios. We practiced our asses off. We did the work. And I'm so proud looking back. And I have a new record coming out. So it's still in me. But I am so proud of the seriousness that we took. It wasn't dependent on record sales, obviously, but it was as if we were a platinum selling band. We took our job seriously. We got on stage and we performed. We were not too cool for school. We wanted to bust our asses off. And so we did that. And that was the first thing I felt. Just this feeling of like, I need to do this. I want to take advantage. I don't want to let this go.
Mhm.
And the second thing was I was aware enough, and I lost it sometimes, but I was aware enough in the moment of appreciating it. I was like, I knew at the time that it was pretty good. I knew that. And I'm
Mhm.
happy knowing that too. I didn't
Right,
go
right.
10 years and I never like, I did. I
That's
remember being in Amsterdam. I was on tour for about a month with my guitar player, opening for this girl. And we got off the airplane and we were tired, we were exhausted. We were walking through the streets of Amsterdam, and I'm like, let's just stop. I remember this. I go, let's just stop for just a moment and appreciate the fact that we are in Amsterdam and about to play a show in Utrecht tonight, and let's just kind of be here for this. So I knew this is long before health, coaching or anything that I do now. I remember those moments very vividly of I got to stop for a second and just make sure that this isn't going anywhere because there were times in LA where I was like, this is pretty great. I'm so happy. Maybe could not quite enough, but I'm
Mhm.
happy. I'm very happy that I took those moments and really appreciated it because it was a really great time. I'd get up, brew a pot of coffee, I'd go in my studio, I'd write,
Yeah.
and then sometimes I'd go bowling, but and then we'd rehearse at night, smoke a bunch of cigarettes, kind of thing. And it was a really, really cool time,
And you
so.
and you had a lot years of that too. This wasn't just
Years.
like a weekend or
No,
or a few
it
months.
was, yeah, it was, I want to, well, from music, I mean, I was playing gigs starting in 91, 90, up until, so 16, almost 20, 16 years before I moved out up here where I live now. But the quartet was going for 7 years, something
Wow.
like that.
Yeah.
And,
Pretty
putting out
awesome.
records and, it was, it was a lot. I mean, it was life consuming. It was like that thing. So life consuming that, the experience of it, especially as we got a little bit of heat enough that we were touring, started to make me very burnt out by Los Angeles. And that was, didn't, I just assumed I'd live in LA. My wife and I just figured we live in LA forever. Like just kind of like we had friends there and like, but I especially, she was a little more mobile. I wasn't because I was tied to LA because of the acting and in theory the music. But I got to the point where, in fact, there's a documentary on the band and when we were
Hmm.
recording our last album, and is the last quartet album called Roundabout Way. And I had already decided I did never want to play in Los Angeles again. I hated Los Angeles. I hated the gig scene. I had just gotten, promoters that I had worked with for 10 years, still were like, so you're going to bring some people out? I was like, God, stop. Just shut up. I'd be in Berlin and they're like so happy that you're here and they're welcoming and they just value music. And then I'd come to LA and be like, so you're going to bring some people? Like, God, I just told the band. And in that documentary, we, interestingly, a German band that I had played a gig with met in Germany. They were coming to LA and they said, hey, we'd love to do a show with you. And I hadn't played in LA a long time. And I said, okay, because I knew him and I was like, all right, we'll do a gig with you. That was the last Sid Hillman Quartet gig ever until my 50th birthday when we reconvened and did a show in LA in 2019. But at that point, it was the last show. And you can see it's on video. The look on my face, miserable. I didn't want to be there. I hated every moment of it. We were recording the last record, so I basically used it as a rehearsal session. We just kind of burned through every song that we were going to record and then just booked it. I was like, I can't deal with this place. It was killing me. And then pretty soon after that is when we moved, and we got out of there. And my guitar stayed in its case for like 3 years.
Hmm.
I mean, I did not play. I was so at that point had gone too far, and I had burnt out, and I did not play guitar for like 3 years after that when I moved up here. And you'll maybe appreciate this, but it was small stepping that got my guitar back out. It was I'm just gonna hold it for once a week. I mean, I just had to kind of reintroduce, and this is when I was doing it hours every week, reintroduce myself to the guitar. Just hold it, not even play it, just hold it, put it on the stand, just hold it, because it was still there, and I knew it was there, but every time I would think, and then I slowly reintroduced, and so now it's back full force.
I remember when you went through that. I don't remember what year it was, but I remember I was that was when I was like regularly listening to your podcast on the way to work and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, uh, because I understood for you, it was no longer your career, and or if it ever was, it never quite was, right? Because you had the acting
Yeah,
was the main like
just
the
not
money.
monetarily, but it was
Yeah,
definitely
I
my
get it. Just
career.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a very same. I never made
Yeah,
money enough to survive from performing, but I've been a
right.
performer, songwriter.
Right. So it's exactly the same. So it's your career, in your mind,
Yeah, it's
right?
not
But
like
then,
it's not, but it
right. But when I
besides
moved up, well, when you heard me on the podcast, it was no longer my career.
right, and was no longer a hobby apparently too, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah. And
so
that
then
was, I mean, yeah, super weird.
you had to kind of say, hey, almost like not an old girlfriend, but like an old friend. It's like reconnect with an old friend. You're not sure if the relationship's going to work out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And you have to redefine it because when I reintroduced it, now I've got, 3 kids, 2 of them are twins, a new career. And so then it was like, where do I fit this in? Because it's no longer the thing, it's one of the things. And that was
Mhm.
an interesting, so that was like another change of in a way, identity. And I remember when my first book came out, I was writing my bio for the book cover. And I remember, and I put on there like, longtime musician and actor. And a friend of mine was like, don't mention acting and music. She's like, don't, nobody cares. Nobody cares. You're like doing this. It's like a health book. Like, don't even mention. I was like, oh yeah, good point. So I took it off.
Mhm.
And I remember being in conflict with that for a while because on one hand, I totally understood her point, but later when I started talking about health and happiness in the way that I do, those things are absolutely as important as anything else. They are absolutely as important as my becoming a certified, nutritionist and running coach and breath coach. The creativity and that aspect of my life is not oh, it's used to be, it's never left. And it was only a matter of like, how do I bring this back in on what level and sort of carving out a space for it in my new life and whatever, and then sort of rediscovering the joy. And that was really what it was. I started to like, oh, I love this now that I don't have to play in a club in LA.
Right.
And I remember, and I remember then I started, and you probably heard it, and I couldn't even tell you when, but there was a point where I was like, I'm not hiding this anymore. I'm going to talk about music because it's who I am. And that's when I started like putting my songs at the end of the podcast. Like I didn't want to have to pay for music. I don't even know how you even do that. So I was like, I have a catalog of 75 songs. And so I started
Yeah.
with like people would turn it off. Some people did, some people didn't. And so it was sort of like, I'm bringing this back in. I'm sorry, but this is exactly who I am. I'm also this and this, but I'm this also. And that's a interesting conversation to have, having been only music, making a living acting, but full music. Now I was like, oh, music, but also health coach and father, and it was like kind of putting it into the thing and into the repertoire and finding out how much I want to devote to this versus the other things and at any given time kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think for me, hearing that stuff about you, it just makes you a lot more relatable because I have wore so many different hats in my life, and what is a career? I mean, it's what is a job? It's like who am I as a person? It's every bit,
That's right.
So like with my autobiography, I'm trying to make each year almost the same length of time, which is very hard to do. Instead of like focusing like this was my success point, this is my failures, just trying to like this is my experience as being a human
Interesting.
at every different age
Interesting.
category, which is a very challenging, but it's kind of what I want to, the way I want to do it. It's seeking my truth, a life in context. That's the
Nice.
name of it. And,
Nice.
you know, so I can't say that the little boy who was, watching He-Man in the living room and eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches any less significant than the guy who is writing a book or who's, performing in front of a bunch of people. It's that experience matters too. And of course, unhappy experiences count too, and
Yeah.
you got to measure how much you want to talk about that and in what
Yeah.
ways. But um, yeah, but anyway, like I saw that you're a human being who's done a lot of different things, and you found your way. But I definitely could see when you made videos, there was always a little funny, but they were serious,
Mhm.
and I could tell because you're an actor, you made a point to kind of act in it and you would like stage it so it was like an episode of something to watch
Mhm.
as well as it had a message. Then there'll be your music,
Yep.
dispersed in the podcast or maybe in your videos sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, he's using the whole animal,
Yeah.
like
That's
you eat
right.
the whole animal. You're not
Yeah.
throwing any parts of you out,
Yeah.
which I definitely appreciated.
Yeah. It was
Yes.
interesting as an actor. Like it's an interesting perception because I don't know if I was conscious of it, of being an actor in the videos, but I definitely, I mean, you perform. Anytime you're in front of a camera and you're paying attention to what you're doing, then you're an actor. Sorry, but you're either a good one or not a good one. But, I mean, everyone goes, oh, Tom Cruise, he's just himself. It's like, you can't be yourself when there's 200 people, crew people looking at you. You can't be yourself. That's a craft. That's a craft that you pull off. Maybe he doesn't have range, but to be to seem like there's no cameras on you is a lot of effort and focus. So people should sort of understand that about acting. It's not easy to kind of maintain that focus. But I remember doing the videos early on, and I remember, and I can't remember the name of the book. It's like something like Who You Are. Not who you are. Anyways, it's like a clip. It's like clips of little bits of things throughout the book about art. And one of the things it said is if somebody goes and sees you give a talk, you should perform because they can get the same information out of a book or they can get the same information somewhere. They're coming to see you live and you should perform that. You should make it interesting for them. And I was like, that is super true. So I remember making my first YouTube videos. And again, success or fail, I have no idea. Maybe everyone thinks they suck at. I have no idea. But I do know my effort was I'm not just going to phone this in a weird little every time there was like I never had enough money to buy like the fanciest stuff, but I always had like nice equipment. I always same with music. I had a nice guitar
Mhm.
and we recorded on 2-inch tape. It was not money I had at the time, but it was like, I want to do this best as I can in that situation. And so, my videos, my podcasts, they were professionally done by me. I learned how to do them. I took classes on how to edit audio. I took classes on how to edit video and online courses. I learned how to do this because I didn't want to phone it in. I just wanted to be good at it in terms of what I want to do. And again, succeed or fails out of my hands. But that was a real effort. It was like, how do I make this? And I look at the old videos, and of course, it was a handheld camera, and the image is
Yeah,
crap.
sure.
But I mean, I like them, and they were edited,
Yeah.
and they were, and I was trying to get a message across, and I wanted it to be entertaining. I wanted it to be entertaining. I wanted it to be something that people would remember and maybe get something out of. So yeah, it was conscious in that sense of like trying to do a quality product,
Yeah,
that
like
was
yeah,
that
I
was
don't like I didn't
representative.
feel like you were acting per se, but I knew you could tell. I rewatched something because I wanted to show my son who you are today, and I'm like, yeah, because it was the one about the eating a big freaking salad, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I mean, at the end, you sit down, and you eat it. So that's a bit of it's performance, right? Obviously, you don't
totally,
have to do
100%,
that,
hundred
you know.
percent.
And the way
And
and it's also you like a director too. That comes across your directing head,
that's
because
right.
you want the shot a certain way, and you
Yeah.
want to have a punch of some sort of joke here, or maybe like a serious point, another
Correct.
moment.
Every time on my videos when I'm finishing a trail run, it's because I finished the trail run already. Then I set the camera up on top of the car. Then I ran back to where I was, and then I finished it again on camera. I mean,
Right.
these things are crafted. I don't care who you are. If you see
Totally.
somebody running through New York City, it's because they set up cameras and had to go back
Mhm.
and probably did it 3 times. And so it is that challenge. And in that video, when I watched Pretty in Pink,
Right.
one of my favorite movies ever. At the very end, and you see this credit, that's because I took the video up to the TV, played that one scene, then I sat down, then I replaced it, then I sat down on the thing and acted like I was watching it, but I
Yeah.
wasn't really. And then you know what I mean? And so it
A
is
lot of
acting.
effort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's those things, those videos and these podcasts. I try to make them sound as natural as possible, but I mean, I just finished my last episode of What Sid Thinks. I don't know if you know that,
Yeah.
but people kind of go like, "Oh, it's 20 minutes." But it's like it's not 20 minutes. It's a lot of work. It's hours per episode for 20 minutes. It's, thinking about it in the car and leaving digital notes and putting that down and kind of going through the bullet points and like where do I want to go with this and getting calm beforehand and, having a cup of coffee and just kind of relaxing just to kind of get in the, it's all that stuff behind the scenes that people don't understand what that is. They come to me and go, "I'm going to start a podcast." I go, "Good. It's great. I'll help you, man." And then they burn out on it because it's harder than you think it is.
Hmm.
And it's like it takes effort and you got to learn how to edit audio afterwards, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. And it depends on what level of sort of professionalism or polish you want to bring to it, you
That's
know?
right. And naturalness.
Yeah.
Like it takes time, like public speaking. I'm good at it now. I've been doing it a long time. And the more you do it, and that again, because of music and stuff, like I'm comfortable in front of a crowd. But that is very, like, I don't talk to anybody for a good 10, 15 minutes beforehand. I get very focused. I do my breath work. Like, I have to get in that space. It's a performance. I'm not reading notes. I'm
Mhm.
ad-libbing. I know my bullet points, but I let it kind of fly. And that's because I have to do the hard work of getting in that head area where I can ad-lib. And that's a lot of effort. It takes a lot of mental energy to kind of get that focus.
And again, that's all like that's why you're uniquely suited to it from my perspective, is because of you've been a singer and you know the importance of performing and you know the importance of the words and and the acting, and you're the breath coach, but
Yeah,
beyond being a coach, you're a human being who
that's
knows
right.
the importance of breathing and calmness and
That's
being
right.
natural. So you just embody it by taking it seriously, and that's where
Yeah.
that sort of serious aspect
Yeah.
comes into play.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
You know the band with the White Stripes, of course.
yeah.
I remember, I like them, but I can't say I'm like a huge White Stripes fan. But I remember seeing them on the first time I'd heard about them, and I remember thinking, oh, a lot of, it's the hype. But they were on Saturday Night Live for the first time, and they played Dead Leaves and Dirty Grounds. The first time I ever saw them, and I said, I should check these guys out, see what everyone's talking about. And I was like, okay, fully get it. Like they perform. And I mean, I love bands that put the effort in. Like he's not walking up there just too cool for school, just kind of. that guy goes and goes hard.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking like I'm not maybe a huge fan of the band, but I fully appreciate everything that they brought. Two of them, drummer, guitar player, and he is phenomenal. He's moving the way he moves and plays at the same time. You've got to look it up on YouTube. Dead Leaves and Dirty Ground, SNL, White Stripes. It is so good. And I remember I was deep in the music thing, and I just remember thinking like, all right, I hope that guy gets super successful. He already was. I was just like, keep it up because that's the real deal, right? I always appreciated that kind of effort of like performing like that. I always like that's so cool, like really, really. And I know that, and I partly because I know the work that it takes to get that done. I know how much hours it takes to be able to pull off that kind of performance to make it look so raw. It takes a lot of effort, and sometimes we'd be worried about over practicing as a band
Mhm.
and then but it's really hard to over practice in a way because you're in a studio setting so but then you get on stage and that's all you got is to rely on have I practiced enough so that you can actually perform it this time. So you got to
Mhm.
kind of really practice it in a way that you can do the things without being self-conscious so that you can then relate to the crowd. And so I learned that early on that this takes a lot of work to pull off. Same thing with the podcast. It's like I know the information, but can I communicate or on a video, can I communicate it in a way that gets connection there with the people watching? And
Mhm.
that's hard work, super hard work.
I have a funny story just remind me of with the importance of practice. I remember a little bit similar. We have various points of like your biography and mine. There's just these like cross points that like help me to relate to you, and
All
maybe
right.
vice versa.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Anyway, so there was a period where I had John Henry Sheridan and the Pencil People. So you like it was my band, right? So you had your band, and I imagine So Tim Quartet was based on your vision, right?
Yeah,
And your song, yeah.
yeah. Found
So
really good people to do it with me, but yeah,
right, yeah.
yeah.
And so I've been in several bands that were like democratic bands, but then at some point I had John Henry Sheridan and the Pencil People, and that
Nice.
became a thing because I did a lot of gigging around in New York City and Brooklyn and Manhattan. With my solo albums came out in college days, and then so I had this moment to like really play with a rock band. Anyway, we didn't get to rehearse that often because it was kind of on my, it was up to me to put it together and then pay for it, and I
Been
didn't
there,
have
been
money
there.
really.
Yeah.
So anyway, and they had to be enthusiastic and open in their schedule and but whatever. So I practiced, and one day we were doing a gig, and it was a song, and I felt I was the singer and playing the guitar, and the whole after the intro, I'm like, I have no idea what the words are to this song. I really like I have no idea. And as we're approaching the first line, the wall
Terrifying.
was coming at me, and just muscle memory, the words came out and, like beyond my brain. It was just like, I was like, thank God,
Oh man, that's
because I had no
rough.
clue what the words are.
That happened to me once in
Because of
Germany where
practice.
I couldn't, yeah, and that happened to me once in Germany, and we were playing every night, and I was rehearsed, and for the life of me, it went out of my brain. One of my songs, and it couldn't, how it is, and it was like, oh my God, we couldn't play it. I go, Jack, my guitar player, I go, Jack, we can't play this right now. I don't remember the song. It's so weird. So weird. The brain looks, the
It's
way the
amazing
brain
that can
works.
happen.
Yeah.
But
Anyways,
the second, all I needed was that first word,
right.
and I think it came to me like a split second before like impact,
Yeah. And then it's the
before that
floodgates.
moment was necessary, and then out came the rest.
That's all you get. It's so funny to see the parallels because now, like, I'm a running coach and I've done, ultra marathons, let's say. Not for anybody listening, I'm not a good runner at all. But I talk about it in my ultra running book, which is all you have when you get on the starting line is your training. I mean, for especially if it's your first ultra, that first time you toe the line, you don't know, you've never run the distance, you've never done all 50 miles. Most I hadn't. When I ran that first ultra as a 50 miler, I had only gone 31 miles ever. So that day I was going to run 19 more miles than I had ever run in my entire life. And I'd only run 31 one time 2 months before. Before that, it was like 20 miles. So really, it was like a good 30 more miles than ever, like comfortable. And all you got is training. I mean, all you have is like, well, I hope this worked out, like because there's nothing else. And so when you step on stage, it's like that too. Did I work my ass off? Okay, then I can't guarantee success, but I can guarantee that I increase the chances of success. And that's the best we can do. And it's
Hmm.
just the hard work of, it's having a work ethic. And that's why I always said, like, my band never hit. We had a lot of possibilities. We were, like there was always like I thought maybe this is it, and it never was. We always hit this little ceiling, but we behaved and we're ready. I will say this confidently, had we gotten a break, we would have been totally ready for it. That
Hmm.
100%. We were like, we got KCRW is this very, very famous radio station in LA. And they had heard of us, and we had they had our record, and they invited us on this really famous show at the time, maybe still. It's called Morning Becomes Eclectic, and it's this Nick Harcourt guy, and he was famous DJ, and it was LA market, and they called and they said we want to have you on. And I was like, holy God, oh my God, it was like and my drummer to this day, we were in the studio in the radio station, and he was kind of behind me, and he goes, yeah, I remember your butt was like twitching. Because I was like so nervous, I was like tensing up. He goes, I always remember I was like sitting behind his drum set, watching my ass just like twitch because I was just so nervous. I was like clenching up. Anyways, but but like and that was like a massive break for us. I mean, this is major market. There's like a big break for us. We thought, but we were ready. And it was like we weren't like, oh my God, we got to get everything together. We were like, okay, another rehearsal, and then we go in and we did our job. And you can listen to it. Whatever, it's online somewhere, I'm sure. But it's we performed it well, and so it's like that's the. And I have come later in my life, just doing what I do now, to understand that it's the hard work that makes happiness. And so, it's like I liked those gigs and those were fun experiences, but I also just as fondly remember the rehearsing, the songwriting, seeing a song come from nothing into something.
Hmm.
And, those are the things that I go, oh, that's the hard work of this, that I really, really appreciate to this day. And try with my kids now. Like, hope they get straight A's, be amazing. But I'm trying to teach them hard work. That's my goal. Whether the grade comes in and gets paid off or not, it's sort of out of our control. But I'm teaching them successfully or not. But my wife and I are all about the work. Are you working hard? If you're working hard, then I don't give a shit about, excuse my language, I don't care about the grade. But if you're not working hard, then that's a problem, in terms of what we're trying to impart to them. It's like, are you working hard? Then you're going to be happy even if you don't get the A in a certain class. You're going to have a good life because you've gotten used to and trained your brain that the work of it, putting your life into something in a serious way, is what pays off on every level, and artistically and otherwise. And that's just one of the, I kind of like getting older, because there's these kinds of things of, I'm writing a new book right now. It's a novel. I have no experience with writing a novel,
Hmm.
and it's a struggle, but I'm so much better now at just, I need to get a first draft done, and I'm not wrangling as much with every sentence to be perfect. I kind of go, okay, I
Hmm.
just got to get this out. So I'm writing sentences that I know damn well I'm going to be changing later because they're not super good, but I got to have something to work with. And the cool thing about experience of like a life worked, this is my fifth book, and not a novel. I mean, this is a novel, but I've never read a novel, but I go through that same process. And same with songwriting and everything else. I mean, there's songs that never made it to an album because I listened to them later. I'm like, oops, that's not good, and it just goes in the trash. But it's like you got to get to freedom is getting past that kind of getting locked into, I was talking about thousands of screenwriters in LA. I'm a screenwriter who never writes screenplays.
Hmm.
They're a screenwriter and they're doing a thing in the coffee house, but they're not creating screenplays because they want this one to be Citizen Kane. And it's like you got to write five crappy ones to get the one that's okay, and you got to keep churning that out to get the time in your experience of that, and that's creativity, period, but also just in every walk of life, I think.
Yeah, it reminds me of are you familiar with Seth Godin? You probably are,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
He had
all bald guys know each other. You know that, right?
right, I know, yeah. Yeah. And the singer of Midnight Oil, right?
Yeah. Oh, deep cut. Deep light on bonfire, whatever the fuck. So
Right.
good. Midnight Oil, fantastic. That guy was a
Great.
politician.
Yeah,
Did you know that? He ran, he was like a mayor or something.
really.
Yeah,
Wow.
the lead singer of Midnight Oil. God, good deep cut
Interesting.
Australian. Great.
Right. Um, yeah, oh man, I
Seth
lost my
Godin.
train of thought there. Yeah, Seth
Seth,
Godin.
yeah.
So what I liked, I'm not a big fan of his, but I read a few of his books. I was listening to his podcast at some point, and what really stuck with me, well, one thing he said, he always keeps his inbox at zero. That I like that. I don't get it to zero, but I keep within 10 or so
Yeah,
because I can nowadays. Years
interesting.
ago it was kind of impossible, but anyway, I like that idea. Like you kind of just clean the slate and
Yeah,
just whatever
yes,
comes at you that day, you know.
yes, right.
But the other point was his shipping, right? Just ship, and he had a more professional or whatever look on it than I did. But for me as a creator and as a guitar teacher for years, it was always like just encouraging people to create something and release it. And
Hmm.
not too
Great, I
often
love
that I
it.
have like someone who's a songwriter want to actually release something, but even just performing in front of people, it's kind
Uh-huh.
of the same idea when you're a guitar student. And for me, that's been so super important. It's just I put out an album, then I put out another album or a single, whatever, and book, and none of it's perfect. And like that one book that I'm proud of, I got the 1 star review, and it's like, but I'm so glad I did it. And when you're in the trenches and you don't know if you could even complete this thing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's just so nice to say to yourself, okay, I'm gonna finish it.
yeah.
Then you can move on to the next thing,
Yes, right.
but if you
You
don't
can't.
finish something, it's kind of
You're
like
stuck.
digestion. You got to poop before you can poop again,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got
Kind
to
of the
let it go.
same
You got
idea.
to get it out. Yeah, and it's really nice to be. I remember mixing songs, and there's a like a curve where you're like mixing a song, sounded better. Good, good. Come along, sounded great,
Right.
great, great. And you get to hear, and with experience, you realize, oh, if I keep mixing, it's gonna start going downhill.
Yeah.
And there's songs that I to this day remember thinking in the studio, this is it, this is nailed. I love it. And now I go, oh, but that's how it's supposed to be. At
Yeah.
the time, it was where it needed to be. It was where I was. I loved it, done, moved on. And because that allowed me to do the second album, which now I don't cringe when I listen to the second album. The first album, I cringe a little bit. This was a solo album years ago. There's some good stuff, but mostly it's, ah. And so, but I remember recording that album, my very first, and watch and listening to those songs being mixed and going 100% into it. 100%. 20 years later, I can't really listen to it, but that's good because I got done with that one and went to the second one. Then I got with the second one, the third one, the fourth, 8 albums later. So you can't, like, you're right. There has to be an experience gives you a point where you go, okay, and I'm to the point now where I just recorded an EP. I got this new album coming out, but I have this nice microphone. I got GarageBand. I'm like, I'm gonna record. I had 3 more songs that didn't make it on the record. They weren't written yet. I wrote them since the record, and I was like, I'm gonna do a little EP, and I think it sounds pretty darn good. But what's interesting is I did a vocal take on one of the songs, and in that song, I my throat gets a little, and I kept it because I
Oh,
love that stuff.
yeah, yeah. Me too.
Yes,
Behind the
and
scenes type of stuff.
that's right. So there's things where we go where it's imperfect, but there's other things we go, I like it because it's imperfect. I could have gone back 5 times and cleaned it, but I was like, oh no, I love that little thing that happened surprisingly. You know what I mean?
I
What's
think
that
someone
behind
should
you?
say hi.
What's that
Yes.
behind you? Is
It's
that
a thing. It's like a little
is he
kind
a
of like a
giant? Is there a
monkey.
giant back there? I don't know what's happening.
It's like a monkey gremlin giant. Yeah.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
you get to the point where you're like, I like the stuff that is imperfect. I love listening to my old records sometimes. I don't listen to them a lot, but I remember recording them so vividly. I remember the mistake, nobody would know. If you listen to
Right.
something, people would not know that was a mistake, but I know it was, and I love it. I
Yeah.
love that, and I love that we moved on from it. It's like, oh, that's a little cool little magic that happened. It's not so robotic.
He's going to bed soon. Say goodnight. Good night, Kai.
Yeah, cool.
You want to say hi to Sid?
You want to say hi? What's his name?
Kai.
Kai. Good night. What? I didn't hear it.
He said he's afraid if he starts talking, he won't stop. He's
Oh,
gonna.
yeah, no, I have that same problem, Kai. Go get some sleep, buddy.
All right, Kai. Have a good night. Okay. See you 8 and 9 in the morning. So Kai's homeschooled.
Oh,
So him
okay.
and I see a lot of each other, which
Yeah.
is great. I
And
mean,
talk about
there's
a schedule, right?
yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty much faith in the universe and how we exist where we do and pay bills and stuff. It's all
Yeah.
just like a Hail Mary pass.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I
And
feel.
trusting the universe and helping my mom out and stuff.
Yeah.
Doing what I know it's
It's
important.
yeah. That's the thing. That's the thing.
But yeah, we like homeschool. I'm not a proselytizer of it, but for us it works. And
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I live in a little town now, the anti-LA. It's like a little town on the coast of like 3.5 hours drive north of San Francisco. Like we're very remote.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of like little schools, there's some homeschool kids up here. It's kind of, and so it's kind of in that connection,
Yeah, I
world.
think
Yeah.
it's a bit different. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's from going to public school in New York City. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we moved out to LA. We were just talking recently, my wife and I, because we were like wondering, because kids have, my kids are teenagers now and they're playing basketball and it's struggles. And she's like, maybe we shouldn't have moved. Maybe LA would have been, more opportunity. I was like, do you remember what it was like when we lived? When we left there, we had friends that were hiring a consultant to help get their kindergartner into schools, like a consultant to help the application process. I was like, we left that and we are better off for leaving. And I'm sorry, there's no way to know, maybe not, but I can't help but think, that my kids being able to run outside barefoot for their whole youth was a bonus, and so you just kind of have to roll the dice,
Yeah,
is
and
what it is.
just not have to deal with the traffic situation in the
No,
park and the
I
kind of
just I remember I've been up here now 19 years. I've been in this little town. I
wow.
almost daily appreciate the fact that there's no parking meters anywhere. There are not, literally. And I go to the post office, and the woman that works there has known me for all 19 years. She asked me, how's your daughter? She knew her, she was 19 months old. One time I went in there, I was speaking in Edinburgh. I had a speaking thing in Scotland a few years back, and my passport had expired, and so I needed to get a renewal. So I go in, I've got the application, and I hand it over, and I go to pay with a credit card. And she goes, "Oh no, you can't use a credit card for a passport. You have to use cash or a money order." I was like, "Oh, good Lord." And I know her. I was like, "I don't have cash. All right, I'll have to come back." The other post guy there, who I know but never knew him outside, he goes, "I got you covered." He pulls $120 out of his pocket in cash and pays for my passport application. And I go, "Holy crap." He goes, "You'll get me back." I swear to God. I was like, "That's the best thing ever. Like, this is why I live in a small town." So I ran out to the ATM, got money, and brought it back and gave it to him. But I mean, he literally pulled the money out of his pocket and covered my thing so I wouldn't have to deal with it later. I mean, it was like, this is the cool, that stuff is a dying art. And
Yeah,
so I don't see that happening in LA. I'll put it that way.
it sounds like out of It's a Wonderful Life or something. That's a
Totally. There's
cool
been
scene.
moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a couple of fun music questions for you,
Cool.
like this or that. Uh, Aerosmith or Led Zeppelin?
Uh, would have for years, Aerosmith would have been hands down. Just over the last like 5 to 7 years, I've started to fully get. Like, I never liked Robert Plant's voice. I gotta tell you,
Me too. Me too.
oddly enough, and I always liked the music, but now I kind of get it. And so I would probably err to Zeppelin,
Hmm.
although I probably can't say this because it's a little bit inappropriate for your podcast, probably. But I was in an Aerosmith video once.
I do remember that story, and I'd love for you to share it. It's cool if you
Are
want
you
to share it.
sure?
Yeah, we
Okay.
I can get a little raunchy sometimes.
I did a whole podcast episode on this story because it was so hilarious. So your listeners can look it up. It's on YouTube. It's called, and I love parenthetical song titles, so this is one of them. It's Aerosmith, "Falling in Love," parentheses, "is hard on your knees." Fantastic. You can't get better than that. So my agent calls in and they go, "You got to audition for this thing." And it's a music video. And I go, "Do I?" And they go, "Oh, Michael Bay is directing it. You got to do it." And nothing came of it, of course. But anyways, I show up to this Aerosmith video. I'm in the video, and you can see it on YouTube. And I show up and they go, "You got to go over there, Sid. They're going to harness you up." And I go, "Harness me up for what?" Because I have no idea. And you're going to be hoisted up into the air. And I go, "Holy crap. I had no idea." So I'm
Um,
getting harnessed and they're like, "You got to make sure your legs stay together. Because if you relax, they're going to spread open and like your hips." I go, "Oh, that's good to know. I haven't never done this. Anyways, so they harness me up and they put me in a straitjacket. And so they put me in this big, huge padded room with like three other actors, and they hoist us up. And we're in straitjackets. So we're like in a padded room in an insane asylum. That's the idea. In comes Steven Tyler, and I'm in the front, and there's another guy up there, and then Steven Tyler's in the middle of us. He's in a straitjacket also and wired up. So he gets hoisted up. So there we are hanging out, literally hanging out with Steven Tyler up in the air. And this is just like so one of these moments where I'm like, I cannot believe I'm in this situation. I never would have pegged. Anyways, so we're doing the takes and they're playing the song and he's singing and we're supposed to look crazy and kind of do weird and so at one point they bring us down and Michael Bay comes out and he goes, okay, so on this next take, Sid, I want you to sort of lean forward into the camera. He's like, directing people. And the other guy on the other side of Steven Tyler he goes to that guy. He goes, okay, and I want you to do like a flip. He goes, what's your name? And the guy goes, oh, my name's Lawrence. And Steven Tyler, and there must be 100 people watching, crew and just the hangers on and the director and the,
Lots of people. Oh.
yeah. He goes, Lawrence, and Steven Tyler to the whole sound studio. It's like on Sony Lot or something. He goes, hey, everybody, it's Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia. And he starts cracking up and at his own joke. Well, it was so the whole situation. I mean, it's not a great joke, but see, I'm hanging like, and I'm looking at him he's cracking up at his own joke, and I lost it because it was the fun. But he thought that I was laughing at his joke.
Oh
So he
no.
loved me because I was hysterical. I couldn't stop laughing. I said, "This is like one of the funniest things I've ever seen to this day." Hey everybody, Steven Tyler, right? Can you picture it with a big mouth? And for the rest of the day, he's like, "Hey, make sure my buddy Sid gets taken care of." Like I was his pal for the day. He'd never know me right now in a million years, but it was that day I was Steven Tyler's bud because I just thought that joke was. He thought that I thought that joke was phenomenal, and it's an okay joke, but him telling it and laughing at it was super awesome. And so, anyways, yeah. So you can see me in that video hanging next to Steven Tyler. That's minutes after that happened. Just so you know.
What a bizarre cool
Yeah.
story.
So I would say probably Zeppelin now, but I have the history of Aerosmith. Hey,
Hey Kai,
Of course.
Aerosmith or Led Zeppelin? We just discussed that.
this is
We
a
do
real,
talk all the time.
yeah, yeah,
Overall, Led Zeppelin, but some
yeah,
songs from Aerosmith I like more.
yeah.
So then kind of tie.
Kind of a tie.
That's a deep question. Yeah, a buddy of mine's he's real into 70s rock. And a few years ago, my kids, I show them like play them everything. And I called my buddy GV, Greg Vincent. He's one of the best guitar players I've ever seen. And I said, I need a little primer. And so he got on a Zoom. My twins were like 10. And he goes, okay, here's what you want to do. And it was like Zeppelin 4. Then you want to hear Yes. And he kind of went down. And so that's when I started listening to I can't remember the name of the album. What's Zeppelin 4? There's actually an album name. I can't remember what it is.
That's the one with Stairway on it, right? Yeah, yeah. Zeppelin 4 is more or less what it's known as. I forget
Okay. Yeah. There's actually like an album, but it doesn't matter. But anyways, and that's what he said. And so that's when I started listening to that. But I mean, even since then, it's like Motorhead, like stuff I never would have listened to. I'm like, oh, so it's kind of interesting to just kind of like now I'm getting into all sorts of different stuff, that way.
Hmm. All right, here's one.
By the way, I
Yes.
want to actually say one: a progressive band or a progressive rock band. Yes, or
Oh,
Blue Oyster Cult.
I'm going to go with yes on that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, you have a knowledgeable kid.
I guess I'll say
You can go
yes
pretty
too.
deep on this stuff. Yeah, you
Yeah.
say
Even
yes.
those bands I both love a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bluish Cold, yeah. But I would go with yes, and that's because of that same guy. He's a huge Yes fan, and so he introduced me to that years ago when I was still living in LA. Yeah,
And there's no
What about Stones or the Beatles?
Stones.
Stone.
I got to
Really?
tell you, this is going to be sacrilege. I'm not a huge Beatles fan, and I know that you have to be a Beatles fan. I appreciate them, but Stones, hands down.
Really? Okay. Well, you're definitely preaching to the choir with that, 'cause we're not big Beatles fans. We
Oh,
appreciate them. We
that's
get
very
them.
refreshing. That's very
Yeah,
refreshing.
not a big fan, but also not big Rolling Stones fans.
Okay.
Yeah, I
How
don't
about
get Rolling Stones.
how about this? The Kinks.
Yeah, I just haven't listened to them enough. What I
Go
heard,
back
I
go
like.
back and listen to the Kinks. Yeah, there's some old Kinks I really still dig a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any particular album?
I have a couple Kinks vinyls. Yeah, give the people what they want on vinyl. Still.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe give that.
Yeah, you
All right.
should.
By the way,
I'll
we
revisit
get
the
the
Kinks.
cowbell here.
Oh, cowbell. Sure. Old
Just
school.
letting you know.
One of the great SNL skits of all time.
Yeah. You never get enough cowbell.
You never get enough cowbell.
Yeah,
And this is a cassette tape that's blank.
I've got a few cassette tapes. A lot of my old song ideas, I have to keep them because I never know when I'm going to want to listen, are on cassette. I still have a cassette recorder on my desk right there where I write, and I still kind of old school on that. Oh, look at you. Yeah. I have a box of old demos because that was back in the day. I got cassette copies made and I'd send them out to labels, Oh my God. Ugh.
Yeah, I digitize everything. It's part of my autobiography process, and
Oh, smart. I
it's
should
good because
digitize. I just have not gotten to do that, and I should. I should do all that stuff. But my God, the amount of time. Oh,
Yeah, it's like, it's definitely a small steps thing that
Yeah.
I just it's
I mean,
like
I've got a whole like 3 shelves over here of like quarter-inch tape, 2-inch tape, cassettes, just oh, how about old videos, like old mini DV tapes? I mean, my God, I don't even have a player for them. Like I need to go
yeah.
send everything in and go, hey, transfer this into DVDs or whatever,
There
MP3.
are there you could do that. That's
I
an option.
know, just like give me a digital file because yeah, it's just they're probably gonna degrade, at some point.
May I say
I
one?
What's that?
May I say one thing?
Yeah,
What's up?
We actually have a band. Here's
do
a
you though?
CD.
There you go. What's that called? Let me see.
It actually
Gotta show
is.
close up.
By the way, this is a CD show, which is
Okay,
in.
Called
Carriage
Carish
Rabbit. Rabbit. Cool.
Radix. Yeah, like carrots and radish mix.
Aha,
Yeah,
very
we're
nice.
speaking of the White Stripes, we're another two-person band.
There it is. I like
He's
it.
the
Nice
drummer,
and
and
nice and nice and nice and tight,
yeah.
nice and slim, nice and airy. I'm with you. Good job.
We miss the bass. I sometimes I play bass and sing, but then you miss the guitar.
Yeah, the last song on the record coming out is just guitar and drums. And actually, the guy who played some bass on, he goes, "I'm going to put bass on." I go, "Don't." He goes, "No, I'll do it. I want to do it. I would do it." And I didn't use it. I was like, "I don't like it. I like it's just guitar and drums." That last track of the song of the
Nice.
album. Yeah,
How many songs on the new album?
13.
Wow, nice.
That's the same as our first.
Is that
Wow,
right?
yeah,
Cool.
that's a good number.
Yeah,
We have 2
13.
albums already on Spotify, Apple
Oh my
Music.
gosh.
And by the way, my favorite instrumental of all time is Foxheart, which is from us.
Okay.
And one more thing.
Frankenstein.
No. What? All right.
Oh.
There's actually my lyrics to one of our songs, Charismatic.
There you go. Carriage
Oh.
Rabbit. I love it. Very cool.
And so singer-songwriters like let's say James Taylor versus Simon and Garfunkel.
Simon Garfunkel.
Yeah. Okay.
Hands down. Yeah, I mean, I like James Taylor, but just in terms of, yeah, I would go there, no problem.
So I'm
Okay.
curious, what would be your top 5 or 10 favorite bands, artists? Because I really wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't be able to guess it.
Hard for me to say favorites. I've got two
Yeah, I
that
mean,
are
like,
I've got two that are clearly in the top notches, which are Pixies / Frank Black and Vic Chesnutt. Those are sort of my tops. Then, Joe Jackson, Elvis Costello, English
okay.
Beat. English Beat is one of my favorite, to this day, one of my favorite bands. I mean, I listen to Special Beat Service. I probably listen to that once a month. I just go, I just absolutely love it. So like, of sort of like that repertoire, like the old school ones. Tom Waits, love Tom
Mhm.
Waits. Nowadays, have you heard of the band Waxahatchee? Excellent. Like great. So surprised that a client actually was like, "Yeah, check this out." I was like, "What?" And she's fantastic. Waxahatchee, Waxa. She's an old punk actually. She had a band called P.S. Eliot. Her name's Katie Crutchfield, and she has a band called Waxahatchee now, and it's after a name of a creek in Alabama or something wherever she lives.
Oh.
Anyway, the new record is fantastic. It really is. It's phenomenal. So kind of into that. Yeah. So I would say, it's always weird for me to kind of remember these things, but yeah. Um,
Bye.
good night, bud. Um, yeah. So those are. I'm trying to think of anybody else. I mean, there's so many. You know, uh, it's like hard to pour through, but those are
No,
the
I
big,
know,
like
I
kind
know.
of top. You know
It's
how it is.
kind of
Yeah.
yeah
Those are like
unfair to just
those are like
throw it at you.
those are the top fives. Those are sort of my go-tos. The Cure.
Sure. Okay.
Huge fan of the Cure. And it's funny because my wife clearly has especially in high school she was still in Orange County, so she was really involved in that sort of. I was already in Texas, and so then I got into the AC/DC and stuff. I was not into what people were listening to there. So she introduced me to the Pixies. She was a huge fan of the Smiths. She was a huge fan of New Order, Joy Division. Those are bands I got in much later because of her.
Hmm.
Like I didn't even know that. I didn't even know they existed. She's like, "You didn't know that?" I
Hmm.
go, "No, I didn't even hear them, no nothing." So now I'm appreciating those bands in ways that I never did before because I never knew about them. So it's kind of in that realm.
Okay. Yeah, we love the Smiths, love the Cure.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, New Order is pretty cool.
Joy Division.
Joy
We don't
Division's a
know
little
much.
dark for us,
It is.
but
It's pretty dark, but I kind of dig it. Have you heard? This is a kind of a newer one, but Patty Griffin, singer songwriter, put out a solo record called It might be called Living with Ghosts, although that's one of the songs on the album. But it's just her and a guitar. She was out of Nashville. This is years ago. She put this record up at fantastic, like super good. So that I'll kind of revisit those kinds of songs, every now and then. But yeah,
Where would you put AC/DC? Because they're AC/DC is one of our top 3 or 5 favorite bands.
phenomenal. I mean, I have Back in Black original on vinyl. That I remember that and Aerosmith Toys in the Attic were before I left to Texas. I had those 2 records, and then in Texas, that's like all they listened to, and so I was at that point, sort of Talking Heads, huge Talking Heads fan.
Yeah, we
So
like Talking Heads.
yeah, so kind of remembering like some of the music we covered in my band in high school, which was funny that we covered it in Texas because it was not, but we did, we would play parties and stuff, because it was all into that kind of stuff. I loved a lot.
And were you singing those high rock songs?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
me and this other guy, I'm still in touch with him. I'm in touch with 2 guys from high school, and one of them was in that band. He played bass, and he would sing, and I would sing. And I played keyboard, and I would play guitar, but mostly keyboard and then guitar on some songs.
Because most of the singing I've heard is kind of low tone that you more like that cowboy tone.
Nowadays.
Could you do
Yeah.
that sort of like that high
Yeah.
rock stream? Yeah.
Yeah. I can do more than I sing on my own stuff. My own stuff is, I like the lower. I tend to, for whatever reason, I like my hands do not go past like the 5th fret, like ever. Yeah, I don't know why, but I love that kind of. My guitar player in the band would play higher register stuff, but I always write songs like kind of lower side of the thing, and that's kind of where I like that stuff. I'm experimenting a little bit with higher stuff recently, but that's kind of just where I'm at. But I could sing it. I just don't. It's not my own style, but yeah, I could sing it.
Mm-hmm. All right. What about a band like Iron Maiden? A fan at all?
Never was a fan of Iron Maiden. Never was a fan of Black Sabbath. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't, for whatever reason, didn't take. And I wasn't a big. I will tell you, was not a big metalhead. I never, other than AC/DC, Back in Black, and Toys in the Attic, I kind of never went after that into anything metal. And then it got in Texas into glam, and I was never into glam. White Snake, and that was so huge in my high school, like all those bands, and I was a kid at the school. Was like, you got this song by General Public, like I was just that kind of new wave kid still through and through, and then later, came back and kind of did the folky thing.
Yeah, I mean, I never suspected you were a metalhead, but I was just curious where that fell.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it.
Makes sense why Aerosmith and AC/DC would be amenable to you because they're kind of more rock and roll bands.
That's right. Yeah, and but
Intense
later,
rock.
like I said, like Motorhead, like I listened to that.
Yeah, and they
whatever.
consider themselves rock and roll too, actually.
That's right.
But they're putting metal, but
then you can hear the crossover with some punk, even,
sure.
yeah, and so that was interesting too. Kind of listening to, obviously old Sex Pistols, the Buzzcocks. I was a huge Buzzcocks fan in high school, and so like kind of those kinds of things, like listening, and then reggae. Like I like Steel Pulse. I just introduced my son to Steel Pulse. I was like, everyone goes Bob Marley. I go, this is a record, man. Steel Pulse is fantastic. So, I squarely was like mostly into new wave, Elvis Costello, English beat, but I would definitely appreciate those other kinds of things, just not as much maybe, but they were definitely part of my kind of listening for sure.
Cool. And what about guitarists? Do you have any favorite guitarists or like top 5 most influential guitarists to you or something? And it could be today. It doesn't have to be like your whole lifetime.
Yeah,
Today,
not really. Not really. It's funny because I can play, I can hold my own in terms of performing my own songs. But there's been a couple times where I've been somewhere and they're like, "Hey man, jump on stage." I'm like, I have no skills whatsoever to jump on. I was doing a show in Ebensee, Austria once, opening for this band, this really cool guy. And his band, and he calls me up on stage, and I was like, dude, I don't know how to, I don't have music like that. I write songs, but I'm not a musician that way. And he's like, okay, just play these chords and you're fine. Like, he's on stage happening in real time. And I'm like, oh my God, turn my amp down. This is embarrassing. It was fun, but I'm not like this. So I'm a songwriter. I appreciate songwriting, but I can't say that I appreciate playing. I don't have favorite guitarists. Or in jazz there was a guy named Johnny Hodges who played an alto sax that melts my heart, so I can sort of pick out him, Duke Ellington, like in the kind of, but I don't have players in my lists.
Interesting. There's a project I'm currently on doing like music behind my book because my autobiography is my main thing right now, but and behind the scenes my reading plus my next music project. It's a ridiculously big vision of like 60 songs I want to record.
Nice.
You might be interested in the topic, which is the American roots song, like kind of like the Great American Songbook, but of course according to my taste. So similar to like my autobiography, year by year, I'm going
Nice.
decade by decade,
Nice.
starting from 1920 going backward.
There you
So I
go.
want to do like 12 songs per decade of popular American songs that are good,
Whoa. Whoa. Cool.
and because they're all public domain, so you could just put them out. Don't got
Yeah.
to worry
Yeah.
about that, and then not that I expect royalties, but at least you don't have to worry about licensing or anything.
Amazing.
And I'm finding like by like combing through each decade, there's some amazing songs in the 20s,
I bet.
10s, 1890s has a bunch of great songs, and then once it gets before that, it's a little ambiguous to find out the exact published date and stuff. And but I'm gonna do my best, and I'm just having fun with it.
How early are the recordings of those things? Like, do you have to get sheet music? Is that what you're going off of for some of them? Because there's
uh,
no recording.
so like I have some books that are about like the history, so I'm getting hints there. Then I look on Wikipedia and these like archive sites
Wow.
online.
Wow.
It's a lot. It's a
Wow.
big research
Yeah,
project.
it is.
But then you can find like people post like the record. These are all forget what you call them. They're slightly different name than because it's like a wax disc or
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Exactly. Yeah.
So some of those are, but you could find 1920, 1910, like those
Oh.
actual Decca or Columbia, whatever it was that was Victor.
Yeah.
You could find those recordings, and I listen to those.
Wow.
I really
Wow.
try to listen to those original a lot. It's hard because obviously, the sound quality is not what we're used to, but the artistry is so present.
Oh,
So if
yeah.
you could just kind of like use your imagination, and then I take it in, I absorb it, different versions. Bing Crosby sings everything in the world. So any popular American song he sang.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of artists like that. And I take it in, then I just let it happen, and let it come out of my guitar.
That's so cool. What a great project. Good Lord. Keep me
interesting.
posted on that. Amazing.
Yeah, sure. That's interesting.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Sid. I'm sure you got to, get some rest or eat or something like that.
Well, it's funny because my kids are at a track meet, so my wife and I are going to go out to dinner. That's a very novel thing. So
Yes.
they're at an away track meet. They're going to get home till like 10:30. I'm like, we should go out to dinner. So it's a rare occurrence. So we're actually going to go out to dinner. But yeah,
I get it. Yeah, even though we
Yeah.
only have one stinky guy, it's still rare for us to
he's
get.
he's a rock and roller through and through. If I lived
I'm an
near you,
alternative rocker.
we'd be you and me. Hey, you and me both, brother. I just talked to the indie label that's putting out my record. I was like scrounging. I'm going to spend a little of my own money on promotion. And I was like, I'm 56 and I'm like scrounging. What does that say? He goes, yeah, we're creative types. Like we kind of run from a different, we want a different. I'm like, I
Right.
shouldn't be having to like worry about this at 56. Clearly, I haven't made all the right turns. But he's like, that's what you do. You're still an indie rocker. I go, yeah. So
Yeah, and then again, you're also someone who's thinking about promoting their own work at 56. How cool is that?
I know. I mean, I've got a record coming out. Exactly. So silver lining. So yeah. But anyway, this was really fun. I really appreciate you having me on. This was great.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. I was psyched about it. Yoko's like, oh, you haven't sit on there. My wife, Yoko. We're John and Yoko, by the way. John and
Gotcha.
Yoko.
Nice.
And yeah, but we still don't love the Beatles. But
I was just gonna say, and yet you don't love the Beatles.
we like them, but
Yeah. I'm the same way. It's fun. It's kind of refreshing. I mean, I like them, but I've never been into the Beatles. I don't know why.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, it's saturation.
Probably.
You're not really like a super pop guy, from what I gather, right?
Yeah.
Pop
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah. Not really.
Yeah, us too.
Cool.
Yeah, all right. It's been a pleasure. I'm gonna get it up to YouTube later tonight, and I'll
Good.
send you a link so you
Dude,
have
send me a link. Absolutely.
and I'll put your links to all the
Just-
stuff.
Two more things.
Yes.
I have
Talk to
some
me.
more things for you.
Actually, two. Yeah.
Well, of course, next time you're in New York City, you can come and jam with
Heck yeah.
us
Heck yeah. Love to.
and have a nice vegan plant-based lunch.
There you go. Excellent.
I'm just letting you know one thing actually.
Okay.
I also like weird fruit a lot.
Food.
Fruit.
Fruit.
Yeah, strange
Okay.
fruit. He loves weird fruit.
Man, we
Like
are.
I have like 15 already.
Well,
We
I don't know
would
if we
be-
have time for all 15, but
We would be buddies. Yeah, I'm liking
Yeah.
that too. Good for you.
My favorite weird fruit or favorite fruit of all time is the yellow dragon fruit.
Never. I've heard of dragon fruit. Never had it though. Supposedly it smells bad. Is that true?
No,
But it tastes good?
not at all. Doesn't
Okay.
smell like anything.
What's the one that
Okay.
smells? Dorian. Dorian smells.
Dorian. Sorry, got it. Yeah, Dorian. Yeah, Dorian.
By the
That's
way, dragon fruits, I didn't know this for so long. Like they grow on cornfield farms, which I like like fields.
Uh-huh.
I never knew that they grow on vines. They actually
Amazing.
grow on
Amazing.
vines.
Love this. Love that you should put out
Well,
a whole
he's got
book
a
on
date with his wife.
They're like yellow,
that.
like
Yeah.
bumpy.
He doesn't
on
care
the
about a
outside.
date with my wife either.
He doesn't. No, he's got priority. He has his priorities very locked in. They're very well
Strange
organized.
fruit
He knows it. Yeah, yeah,
and
exactly. And
Just
progress.
yeah,
made
yeah.
finish it. There's like yellow bumps on the outside. You cut it open. It's like white and black seeds. The black seeds are edible. In every state, it's edible. But when it's ripe, it's like the texture is almost like pudding or jello. It just doesn't.
Wow.
Pretty good. It's pretty good.
Of
Very
a
good.
yellow dragon fruit. I'm gonna check it out.
And the seeds are edible. And also the taste is like sugar and
Wow.
tropical. It's like
Wow.
tropical sweet.
I'm a big fruit fan, so you've picked my interest.
Well, by the way, you can get it in New York.
Well,
That's the reason I come here.
Next time, I know
Again.
next time.
And one more thing.
Okay, no, that was your one more thing. Best things.
Just this one thing.
Okay, what's that?
It's part of the thing
Uh-huh.
that the yellow dragon fruits. Wait, I forgot what I was about to say.
All right, but you say goodnight like 3 times.
And and your dad will email me when you remember. Okay.
Yeah, I'll give you a whole list of exotic fruits. You have to check it.
Exactly.
All right, man. Yeah, this has
Thank you very much.
Been a lot of fun, Sid. I hope to talk to you again. All the best with your book and
We'll
everything.
be in touch. You too.
You're
Yeah, keep me posted on your projects, man. Sounds awesome.
Cool.
And also it's a cactus. That's what I forgot.
Yeah, dragon fruit grows in a cactus.
There you go. Nailed.
But it's like
Take care of yourself.
Take care. Right.
Bye.
Bye.